Violence and intolerance of foreigners appear to have reached intolerable levels in the last few weeks. With me in studio is the ANC's Deputy Secretary General, Jessie Duarte. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. First, just give our viewers context. What's the ANC's stance on the violence that's taken place in the last few weeks, and what do you think is the best thing to name it?
Well, firstly, we absolutely reject the notion that you solve a problem, any problem, through violent means. And we certainly reject the fact that South Africans and migrants feel unsafe in our country, and that just is not the way we had hoped things would measure itself out. It doesn't matter what you call it, actually. The difficulty we're having is we're all trying to find a phobia name for it, whether it's xenophobia or Afrophobia. It's violence. It's unmitigated, unprecedented violence. Unfortunately, it is peculiarly aimed at people of African origin. And it doesn't suggest that South Africans hate people from other parts of Africa, but it does suggest that there is a perception that has grown over years, that the reason we have joblessness in South Africa, which is completely incorrect, is because there are too many foreigners who come to the country and take our jobs, etc., etc. And the point that we really would like to make is that we made a policy decision as early as 1995 that the best option for us as an economy, as a country, was to open the doors of South Africa to migrants who would also contribute to our economy. And as things grew and other economies grew less able to sustain themselves and their own joblessness in our own region grew, the 90 days a year free visa movement of people turned into something quite different, where people come in on their 90-day visa and never leave. And hence they become what people term undocumented, which is a difficulty for all of us. And let me just say immediately, migration is not issues around migration is not a uniquely South African difficulty. It is global. It's throughout the world. It's how you manage it, how you deal with it, and how you make sure that people don't feel unwanted and unsafe in your country. And that is our position.
Okay. A statement issued by the ANC in response to the violence says, and I'm quoting now, the latest violence underscores the need for government that's in touch with its people.
Yes.
Is it not in touch with its people?
I think that the government, the point that the government needs to assist us with, and the state apparatus, including the Home Affairs, police, the army, all of those various institutions of government that deal with the security of our state and our country, need to accept one reality, that they need to work together. They need to work in an integrated manner. And one of the things that we found had really made South Africans very angry was when the police were pelted with stones on a particular day in downtown Johannesburg, which did say that it would seem as if the police weren't aware of the anger that the people had towards them as police. And the reason for that anger was the accusation that the police themselves were implicated in buying and selling goods that are not correctly brought into the country. And so, yes, that is what that statement is really referring to. If there was knowledge of that, if there was a proper understanding that not all is not well in downtown Johannesburg, that the people in downtown Johannesburg are particularly angry about a few things. And we met yesterday with all of the ANC structures from the inner city. Some of the things people were saying was that, you see, the state must defend us, the police must defend us, the state must defend vulnerable people, and that simply isn't happening. In fact, it's more, the accusation seems to lean towards an accusation.
My question would be, as the governing party, you've had 25 years. So when you were issuing statements about what government should do, some people would say, well, this is something that's in your power and you haven't done anything and you seem to have failed. So what next?
Coming from the SABC, that's quite an interesting question, particularly as you've been so vociferous as a public broadcaster that there must be a separation between state and party. One of the things we do is we make policies, and we put out a manifesto which we expect the government to implement. And one of our difficulties is that we do not seem to see an integrated approach when it comes to the question of how we manage migration. We had mooted for a border management agency or a border management institution that would bring together all the states, all the applications of the state at the entry point. They would work together. They would make sure that we manage undocumented migration. We manage illicit flows of goods. We manage those manner of things. We understand that we have trade agreements with other people from other countries. And our problem and difficulty is that when we as the ANC stand up and say to the police, you've got to get your act together, the very first people that are going to go for us is you. You're going to say that we're interfering with the work of the police. Ours is a policy-making organ, and we stand by what we say. We're not going to change that. Even after 25 years, I think it's... Let me also say this to you. Democracy is a very dynamic institution. It doesn't stand still. Things evolve. We have, in 25 years, done many more things that you must recognize and accept as, yes, they were good things, not just the consistent negativity that comes through. We're in a difficult situation now. What we're looking for is partners who will work with us to find solutions, and that's exactly why we're on the ground everywhere throughout the country and in the continent, and have met with the former frontline liberation movements, and we have an envoy going out to all the various countries. We're talking to people to look for solutions.
So when I'm asking these questions, I'm asking it on behalf of the many people who watch the public broadcaster, and I'm acting as a medium for them and asking the questions that they would want to know. So I'd appreciate it if we stuck to just answering the questions. We can deal with the SABC and the challenges perhaps they've had with the ANC later. The crime statistics that were out last week showed that there were 21,022 murders, that's up nearly 600, over 124,000 total rape cases reported in the last 3 financial years. Children are said to be 41% of those victims, and there's only said to be a 4% conviction rate. So I'm asking, as the ANC, we're now separating you, and my apologies if I didn't make that clear earlier on. What are you finding? Because surely this is not the first time that you've awoken to the situation. What are you finding? What are the reasons that there is a failure to get justice for the majority of especially gender-based violence?
We think that there's a great deal of work that we must do within the criminal justice system, particularly in the court system. We think it's a good thing that they've opened up a number of sexual offences courts that will speed up the number of cases that actually get through the system. But the system itself at the point of investigation is extremely slow and extremely encumbered by looking at issues from more a subjective, individualistic point of view than looking at facts and dealing with those facts and prosecuting people based on facts. We also think that it hasn't helped us, even though we understood bail. We understood the concept of bail was to give somebody a chance to go out and prepare their defense. This isn't working for us, and we would like to see that nullified. We'd like to see our government remove the option of bail for sexual offenders, it doesn't matter of who. We'd also like to see our government taking a harsher measure in terms of sentencing of rapists, of people who deal with women in a violent manner. And we're looking at a change in the law, in the Criminal Justice Act itself, that the law be looked at in terms of whether or not gender-based violence shouldn't be a stand-alone issue in the whole criminal justice system, that it is not just part of grievous bodily harm in general. And lastly, I think where we must admit wrong is that our police are not trained well enough to react extremely swiftly to domestic violence, to gender-based violence, and certainly not act properly when it comes to rape victims, going with a rape kit, making sure that there's dignity and those manner of things.
We saw a march to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange last week where a range of particularly young women came together to protest the scourge. We also saw the leader of the ANC Women's League being heckled by those young women and saying again that they've been failed by the ANC Women's League, by the ANC. So there's a perception, right or wrong, that the ANC has not done enough up until this point to curb that, and basically are not going to be doing enough going forward. So how would you counter that?
Well, we think that it is not an untrue reality. This is our daily lived reality as women ourselves. So even if we are in the ANC, we're not immune to the ravages of what happens to women in every street, in every village and in every town. We ourselves feel that there is a problem. What we're hoping we can push for, and that's why there is this really hard work going on everywhere, meeting people, pushing hard, is we want to see some changes to the laws that we ourselves were comfortable with before. We believe there, and I repeat that, there needs to be a harsher perspective. There needs to be an acceptance that we live in a patriarchal society, that for as long as we are going to apologize for gender-based violence and find excuses for it, there won't be anything that happens that is different. We can't have the same law that didn't work going on and on. We now want to see, and I repeat, that there is a definition of gender-based violence in the law as a separate act of violence, and that it has a harsh sentence attached to it, and that rapists are not given bail. People who habitually beat women up and you get a court order, it doesn't help you. You get whatever you get, it doesn't help you. We believe that repeat offenders, even those who have been released now, need to be revisited, and we certainly believe that we need to have a register of people who are rapists, so that in every community it is clear and understood that in that house there lives a rapist. Convicted rapist, I want to add.
Does that work like that in the ANC? Do you deal with people who have been found to be convicted abusers, people who are accused of rape and the like? Do you deal with them in a manner that you believe that the South African public would be proud of?
We do, but what we won't do is to fall prey to the notion of trial by the media, trial by populism, because we've also found in this last week, we've also spoken to men who've come to us to say, I am a victim of accusation, I've lost everything I have. In the end, when it finally went to court, I was acquitted. There was no evidence that proved me guilty, and I still stand with the stigma. I cannot find a job. People know me in the community as that person who was accused of doing 1, 2, 3. What we do is to tell the men who have done that to step aside, and they do. We're very cautious not to create a situation where we are going to be having an ANC where every man is accused by somebody, and we don't look at things from an objective perspective. We do, but we don't make excuses. In our own building, in Luthuli House, we've run a very serious, very stern, subjectively stern series of events in which we've allowed young women and young men to speak out about sexual harassment. And it's been good. It's been good to do that. They've spoken out, and the people who were perpetrators have actually been dealt with.
Does Duduzi Manana still hold any position of power in the ANC?
Yes, he does. He's a member of the NEC. And whilst Duduzi was accused and he went very public to apologize, we believe that if a person shows repentance and is ready to correct themselves, we must also accept that.
Jessie Duarte, ANC Deputy Secretary General, speaking to us on a range of issues around the violence against foreign nationals as well as gender-based violence, in studio with us. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Tepiso, it's over to you.